welcome Hop Nation podcast to this week's podcast. Today I have Jelena Vetockina with me. Welcome, Jelena.
Thank you, Corey. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you here. Now, for our listeners, whereabouts are you located?
So I'm located in Barcelona right now.
Nice.
Sunny Barcelona.
Excellent. Now, for the listeners who may not know you, you're an expert in organizational health and team coaching and effectiveness. You work with the Professional Business Women's Network as an external as well as an internal consultant within organizations. So welcome.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you so much for this welcoming.
Thank you. Now, tell me a bit about your background and founder's story of how you got into the industry and developed this expertise and interest in team coaching and organizational health and effectiveness.
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually. So, I come from corporate environment, so I always been working in different organizations and always with teams as well, within teams, and, like project managing and different projects and so on. And I think a couple of years ago, I really started diving deeper into people development because this is what really drives me. I just discovered that. So I started attending several courses, and team coaching and then in emotional intelligence. And I just understood that this is what I really like. And from there, a couple of years ago, I got certification, like accredited by ISF. And then on top of that, I decided, you know what, I really like this team spirit, team energy. And this is where I decided to jump to another kind of field. So it's not one-on-one coaching, which I was doing before, but right now more team coaching. And right now I'm just finishing another certification that is different methodology in order to accompany teams, so they increase actually their cohesiveness, their performance, their productivity, and so on. So this is what I'm currently doing. And yeah, probably, I don't know, maybe for the listeners, just for the interest, I'm from Lithuania. But it's been 10 years now that I live in Spain, in Barcelona. And yeah, so if you haven't been here, you should probably come here really. And whenever we can, right? Travel. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, and like I said before in our original just call, Barcelona is one of those bucket list places. I've had friends be there and it's beautiful. And also Lithuania. I have friends that love that area. And so it's an area
definitely
to visit. So tell us.
And then you can find snow as well.
Exactly.
During the winter, because here it's not so cold. But yeah, in Lithuania, it usually snows in the winter.
Absolutely. Lithuania would be closer to Canada than Spain would be.
Well, sure. Kind of, yeah.
Yeah. At least some of the weather. Good. So organizational health, let's talk about that. What are some things that you see around organizational health that maybe is a gap or a problem? And then what are some of the things that you're doing working in the space you're working in to improve organizational health and performance?
So I think when we speak about, organizational health, it's important to mention probably three pillars. I really like to always mention those three ingredients, if you will. So, first one will be the individual, right? So your employees, and then, what are you actually bringing as a person to your company, to your business? So it's like, individual approach. And, what do we do for our employees for them to be fulfilled, right? For them to be engaged and so on. And there was actually a very interesting study conducted by Berkeley University in California. And then, what they're saying is that in order for the person to be fulfilled at the working place, there should be four things, right? So first is the purpose. So a person really needs to understand why no, that their why, as Simon Sinek says. Then engagement, like really go with the flow and, really motivated and doing what he's doing, and understanding why, right? Then the third will be resilience. We all know that sometimes we have stressful situations. It's really important that we know how to bounce back, right? And and really find those anti-stress moments for us. How do we deal with that? And finally, kindness. So this is like how we treat each other and so on. So that would be like the first pillar, like in order to measure, and the way to do that, to see how engaged they are, how do you feel? It really starts with you. And then from the company perspective, you can always start with the Q&A sessions, you can start coaching sessions, team building, but as well those questionnaires that, majority of companies, they do that every year. They send questionnaires, but I wouldn't say that you should do that every year. You should do it very often, actually, to really understand what is happening. So the first pillars is employees, like as well your personal perspective, what makes you fulfilled, and really understanding that, what is happening with our people. The second pillar is leadership. What kind of leaders do we have? Because I'm sure we all know this expression that goes, people don't leave companies, they leave their managers, right? So I think here is very important to understand first what type of manager I am. So am I micromanaging? I'm attend to this micromanagement, constant checks. Do I really care about my people? Do I really find the time to speak to them, to have those coaching sessions? Do I really care about their development at all? So I think here leaders need to be brave in order to really even open the space with their teams to get the feedback as well, right? So, okay, guys, what type of leader I am? What do you say? And not all leaders are prepared for that, because they don't want to get bad feedback. It's not even about bad. It's about being open, right? And of course, let's improve and find time, because another important problem I think that leaders are facing is that they don't have time, to spend really hours with their people, and this is, this is a problem. So the second, as I was saying, the second pillar is leadership, right? And finally, well, not finally, but the third important one, I would say teams, because of course, each team starts from the individual. So if you understand what is happening with your people in general, and then if you thrive and if you really want to become this good leader, you want your teams to thrive as well, to be successful. So this is like where I come more to the space of the teams, in order to see, what drives them, what can be done differently. And essentially, the role of the coach is really to go there, to accompany them, to be there for them, but as well to show them what is happening. So they, as a team, they are creative and they're full of resources, and they're able to understand what is happening and then create and find the creative solution. So it's not about I say to you what you need to do, but it's about, okay, have a look what is happening. What do you think about it? How do you feel about it? And then what can be done as well from there. So essentially, those three pillars, when we're speaking about organizational health, would be those: individual, what kind of fulfillment do I need? What do I do well? So really understanding yourself. And then, of course, from organizational perspective, do we understand our people? Then, what is about our leadership? What type of leadership is the predominant in the company? And then, of course, the teams. How do we really interact with each other? So how do we work together, and how can we excel? Because you can be a really great individual contributor, but if you don't know how to work within a team, you will be just stuck, and you won't be really, you won't be able to excel, to give the best out of you. So I would say those three important pillars.
That's excellent. And I love it. They're the drivers, I call them, within organizational performance, that individual well-being, whether it's the resilience, the purpose and meaningfulness, and that, as well as the team level and that culture and everything, the level of cohesion and leadership sets the tone and their vision and inspiration, because we know within an organizational setting, a lot of what we're talking about is motivation for the people and that alignment. And so the two things I want to follow up on what you said with your 3 pillars is, what are some things that leaders and organizations can do around communication and improving the level of motivation to really what needs to get done? There's an accountability and performance that, what we're saying in the pillars needs to be correct. But at the end of the day, if we aren't getting the results, it's an issue. So where does motivation fit into the philosophy and the pillars, and how do leaders and team members need to better communicate to get the results they're looking for?
Yes, it's a good question. So like on the first one, like how the motivation it's actually the key, right? And there are a lot of different exercises that can be done as a team leader. You can actually start with, again, the open conversation. So obviously understanding your people, what is happening. And then important in order to really motivate your people is to speak about your team's strengths. So, we probably need to change that perspective from constant feedback and saying where you need to improve, instead of changing this paradigm towards you are good at that and this is what you need to do to be better on that. So I truly believe in that, and again, just starting those conversations, there are like questions that leaders can actually start asking their teams, like, okay guys, what are we doing well? Right? So who of you is good at that, and who is able to mentor maybe that's another person. So really start introducing those conversations on team strengths, right? On personal strengths and team strengths as well. And then I think in different companies that I used to work, we had a lot of different programs, like mentorship, for example, mentoring programs. So really good leader sometimes cannot give you what you need. Maybe that leader knows another leader who actually can mentor you. So we, it's the mentoring programs are quite popular, in organizations. And this is where team members sees, okay, he really cares. My leader cares about my performance, about my development, and he recommends someone else to really, for me to achieve that goal. So I would start probably from the really discovering what drives the team, where they're good at, instead of like, of course, we know where we need to go and what we need to improve, but understanding strengths is the key. And then the second question that you asked, Corey?
Is communication, because I've noticed in organizations, if there's problems, 99% of the time, it's going to come down to miscommunication or bad communication. So where does communication fit within the 3 pillars and in terms of its importance and what needs to be done around communication?
Yeah, so I think communication is another very important key, and we're kind of really going into what effective teams probably are doing, right? So they communicate well. And maybe for sure, Corey, this John Gottman study, right, that he divided 4 toxic communication. So we have criticism, he mentions as well contempt, and then there is defensiveness, and finally there is like stonewalling, right? So I think this is very important to take into account from one perspective, like how do we communicate? And again, you can either do the questionnaire, you either can identify maybe there's just that toxic behavior of just one person. So this is important to take into account, because the effective teams, they communicate well. That means that it's not that they don't have those criticisms, because we are all humans, and probably it's not fair to say that sometimes we all use something from that criticism maybe. But the problem becomes when you really feel that and when you really see and observe that it becomes normal, right? So it becomes, this is the way you communicate, the form of criticism or the form of contempt. So this is when it becomes a real problem, because in this environment, you just cannot work, or you're obliged to be there. But if you can choose, you probably won't choose that environment, right? So another very, very, very known nonviolent communication, right? So again, in order to how does it work? So you really state the fact, not your assumption, and then from there, hey, this is what I need from you, right? And then could you please, and so on. So communication, yeah, it's basis. And when I work with teams, and from what my experience, I can see that a lot of them, they're not aware that they are criticizing so much, or they have so many judgments. And it obviously comes to the personal experience as well. In one-to-one coaches, you can see as well. So it's difficult to work in this environment, and I've been in these environments as well, forming part of the team, and it's not fun. Probably you, Corey, as well have your own experiences. So it's very important to create that safe space, right, where you can just share and work together. So I don't know if you want me to just continue on the high-performing teams, because one pillar is communication, behavior, how do we treat each other?
Absolutely. And one of the things that I'm hearing loud and clear is creating a respectful workplace where people can feel safe to communicate freely without the repercussions. And there's a cultural sensitivity as well.
Yeah.
And an awareness piece, especially now, I think, and I'd love to hear what you're seeing, and that over on your side of the pond, so to speak, with everyone pretty much working remote now, the effect this is having on teams, and, stylistically, communication is changed because we have to adapt to this virtual and remote work within teams, where we lose some of that intimacy of being within an environment and more belly button to belly button, so to speak, than, in this team collaboration that's happening, without any sort of locus of control. So what are you seeing in terms of how the remote work environment and, the level of well-being being affected the longer this goes on, affecting team effectiveness, and how has it changed your business too, in terms of the coaching and work that you do with the teams?
Yeah, it's a very good question, actually, because I think, maybe it will sound a bit strange, but I think if the team was effectively without remote mode, like face-to-face, if it was already a good team, like remotely, they will be good as well. So it's kind of, you just take the same problems. And of course, remote, if it's just another problem, from the start, because obviously you need to change everything. And it's true that I see teams that they already got used to that. The teams that they struggle a little bit more in terms of this communication, and then this feeling of space that you can just grab a coffee and go somewhere. But I also saw teams that they're very creative. So obviously we all do already this online coffees, and so it's different. It's just different. I wouldn't say it's worse or better. It's just different, And a little bit commenting on what I said since the beginning, that if there was already a good team, and maybe the question could be like, what actually makes good team, like effective team?
That's a great question.
So
I'd love to hear your thoughts on what makes a good team.
Yeah. So if they already had that in the beginning, if they already were effective, then remotely they will be effective as well. It might take some time, but
better chance.
True.
Yeah.
they will have actually the better chance. Yeah. And we already spoke that one ingredient is communication, right, of the good team. So behavior, I already commented on this, toxic behavior. Really be aware when you are emitting those behaviors or you are a receiver of those behaviors, because the awareness is that, the first step for the change, right? Perfect. So communication, behavior. And then another pillar important is it's vision and value. So do we really understand where are we going as a team? Not individually, not my performance and how I did, but really as a team, how and where we are going. So that vision and values are very important. And then there is a great book by Patrick Lencioni. I don't know if you've heard about it. So like 5 dysfunctions of a team, and he actually explains that the first of the basis is confidence. So then, there's like a pyramid and then everything is based on confidence. So of course, another crucial pillar of these effective teams is confidence. And, the interesting thing about confidence is that you need to be ready to be vulnerable, because when you're vulnerable, you open up. And in those teams, usually they can speak without any problem. They can actually speak about problems. They can open up and discuss their mistakes openly. So again, it takes courage, but if you have a confidence, that we are there for a reason, and it's all about excelling as a team, not it's your fault, it's, as a team, something didn't work, or maybe it's my mistake and guys, hey, help me out there. So confidence is a key. That would be like another pillar, And another important thing I would mention, conflicts. So I think there's a misconception that we always think we need to avoid conflicts, but I always say, we don't need to avoid them. It's actually the important information when you have conflict. Something is happening. And if you're able to do, and you can actually convert it to productive, something productive, something meaningful, you have additional information that you didn't have before. So I wouldn't say to avoid them, but it's true that the conflicts, they're very connected to confidence. Because when the team, there is no confidence, they're likely to avoid conflicts. So of course, if you're avoiding something, you don't speak up, and then you're just not who you are. And maybe you had a great idea, but you know that it won't be. You cannot share it because you don't rely on those guys, and maybe you don't want to be defensive, no. So like resuming, and again, it's not the final list, but from what I've seen with working with teams, like those 4 are the crucial ones: confidence, and then vision, values. Where are we going together? How we're going to approach that. And then the conflicts, how do we really manage them? It's not about avoiding them, right? And communication. So how do we behave with each other? How do we communicate? And I think if those are there, then of course there might be something else, like a tiny, another problem or something to add. The core. But the core would be I would say the core would be those. Yeah. Collaboration, of course. And then.
I really appreciate that, because the confidence piece, we know we need that in a leader. So there's the leader speaking out with confidence, which instills confidence and builds the efficacy within the team. And that's what it's about. It's building the confidence of your team by having the confidence yourself. Because if there's a gap, then things really go sideways. And part of that is that inspiring vision. When you have that inspiring vision, going back to the motivation in team effectiveness, if there's a inspiring motivation and there's a value alignment for the individuals to the organizational, then there's that purposeful goal striving and experience meaningfulness in what we do that's just naturally intrinsically motivating. What I found fascinating, and what's not talked about, is the role of conflict as a positive driver. And I'm loving this, because we know that one of the roles of conflict is actually, it's a pattern interrupt sometimes to bring awareness, because we talked about we need awareness, and it's one way that and quite a visible way in sometimes to snap us out because we're unaware, and we might have a vision and a direction, and then there's conflict stirring up. So there's normally something behind it. So it breaks us out of a path as a pattern interrupt. And it's a way to learn. You know, I talk about learning orientation within an organization being critically important. And it's through the conflict that if we can use it to engage in conversation, and importantly, respectful conversation, because how we engage in conflict determines if it's going to be positive or negative. Because if we do it from a just defending and wanting to be heard and defending our position, it's just going to be butting heads. Whereas if we go, okay, wait, what am I missing? What can I learn from that perspective? And listen and hear for understanding, then we can get a coming together. And it's not the, you know, way one, way two. There's normally a third way that's better than the individual when we have that. So tell me, maybe give us an example without, you know, breaking client confidentiality of where the work you've done with a client or organization around conflict and how you've been able to turn that into a positive driver for teams.
Yes, I know it's a very good question, but you know what I'm seeing, there are two things. Like first, like how a leader behaves within the team, but then as well how the team inside, you know, what is happening there, right? So then when you do a session when the leader is there, it's amazing things, because leaders, they becoming aware of what is happening, of course, when there is, you know, kind of still there is a confidence to share, because we know that some teams, they wouldn't share anything when the leader is there. But I was wanting to add as well to what you said just now as well, you know, how we drive the team and then together, and then, you know, all the performers and so on. So I was just remembering on the top of my head the actual, you know, value that you bring. And, you know, is it really important for you that your own goal as an individual? So then we start this ego battles, or it's really team, you know, so it's really team driver. So when I work with teams, this was as well several times an issue. Wait a second. So what you're saying is because you want to show up, you know, is because you really feel you are important, or you think that it's really helped the team. And there's like, wow, okay, I'm really speaking out of the ego. And of course, we all have our egos, but when the ego is more, you know, and is more important than the success of the team, then, you know, you can clearly see that. And when you return that to the team, to the leader, this is very powerful. This becomes very, very powerful, because they become aware that, hey, maybe my perception was wrong, you know. But again, it requires confidence again. And what we do before we start, we always do some kind of alianza, you know, like you do this conversation in order what type of atmosphere you want to create. So do we want a confidence? Do we want a confidentiality? And then if something goes, you know, not according to the plan, something, you know, doesn't stick, then we come back to this initial conversation, like, hey guys, remember that we promised that we will treat each other, that we will participate. And so, yeah, like just, you know, answering again to your question, showing, you know, what is happening, and then who is speaking. Is your ego speaking, or is this really, you know, the side that you care is speaking, you know, that you want to care about the results and about the team? This is very powerful.
I love it. So with everything we've talked about and what you're seeing, is there any sort of research, personal development that you're doing to, you know, help the organizations, people you're dealing with more based on trends or what you're currently seeing that you're working on?
So there's no research, but it's true that sometimes I get questions from leaders, and of course from my experience, I can advise them something. But the truth is that each team is unique. So even before we start, we always say, hey, where is your need, you know? And sometimes it's cohesiveness, sometimes it's productivity, and sometimes it's just like, you know, it's a startup. So we don't know each other. So of course we have a great tools that the really people through the interesting conversations, they get to know each other better, and from the activities, of course. So I would say that, yeah, I sometimes advise leaders based, on my experience, and then each team is unique. So it's important to understand where are their gaps and where they need to go. And sometimes as well, leader has one objective, and then you come to the team, you come to the group, and they don't want to work on that objective, that was set out by the leader. So then there's the whole conversation. Okay, guys, is the leader agreed to turn and, to swap the initial objective to the one that team wants to work on. So yeah, this is a whole world of differentialities, and uniquenesses, I would say.
Well, I appreciate that. So for yourself, you're healthy, energetic, and having to bring that to the people you work with. What are some of your personal success habits that keep you at the top of your game so you can bring the best to the people you work with?
It's a great question, Corey. I just love it. And I always say to people, you need to understand yourself first, and you really need to find out what works for you. So what worked for me and keeps working is really staying active. So in terms of physical activity, for me, is just the key. And, since I was a child, my mom would always bring me to the swimming pool, to the aerobics. So I kind of have it in my DNA. And, in Barcelona, we just love hiking with my family. We just love going paddle surf during the summer. So for me, it's important. Running, the really activity. And then
and
from
you
other
and your
side,
husband
yoga.
went for a run right before this, right?
Yeah, I went for a run. So I have this energy,
That's awesome.
To motivate. Yeah. And then yoga, I recently discovered the great, this balance and this the good that it does to my body, really, the yoga. Because I tried it before, but I believe that in each phases of your life, you kind of open up to something new, to something else. So I found this, and this definitely helps me. And another thing related to already mentioned to the activity is nature, because I think that nature just brings you to your source. We spend so many hours indoors, and right now even more with all this online. So it just absolutely must really go walk, ride a bicycle, hike, and if it's in the nature instead of the city, it's even better. So that would be like the most to do, a must to do.
Absolutely. And I love that. And especially in this environment, getting out of the building is so, so important. And I know it's honestly a struggle for me right now, because you would think there's definitely better efficiencies. People are being more effective and efficient. There's lots of research coming out on that, but we're also working a little longer is what the research is pointing towards. And we aren't necessarily getting out of the building as much. And I know it's a personal struggle for me. So I'm glad you mentioned that as one, because personally for me, but I'm sure there's a lot of listeners and people I've talked to, this has become more of a challenge. So keeping it as an important success habit, really appreciate that. I'm going to switch things up on you. Imagine your 100th birthday celebration. Who do you want there, and what do you want them saying about you?
It's really like coaching question, like really deep. But, I've previously done this exercise.
It's tough to be on the receiving end, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think, with my husband, when I would say, like, I think like the purpose of life, the way we see it is really in serving, right? So like really serving others, but through your own talents, through what you're doing good. I think that this is really what really makes difference in this world. So I probably would want to see my family, my friends, and just maybe understanding and helping, saying something that, hey, you know what? She served through her talents, through her wisdom, through her advices, and she did her best. Probably that would be the speech that I would like to hear about me when I'm 1,000 years old.
Well, I love it, because when I ask that question, it really gives the listeners and all of us insights into the person who's answering it and their character. And at the heart of you as a person, Jelena, is this servant mentality, that it's not about you, that the work you're doing, it's about others and serving and improving their lives. And, you know, the true experts and the people who do well on a long-term sustainable basis, we just know that that has to be there. Otherwise it gets exposed. So I can't think of a better way to, you know, finish our podcast today. And thank you for joining us on the podcast. Is there anything else you'd like to leave our listeners with before we conclude?
Just probably thank everyone for listening, to thank you, Corey, for having me here, and, you know, just bringing me the last message to really find your own motivation inside, you know, and I this physical activity would really find that voice inside of you that will drive you further, you know, just that, because at the end of the day, your best friend is you. So, you know, sometimes it's not this way. So probably it's important that you convert yourself to your best friend. So that will be my final thoughts of the day. And thank you so much, Corey, for this opportunity and for having me here. It was a real pleasure.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. And we will make sure we give the listeners an opportunity, if they want to reach out to you personally to find out more on the work or potentially work with you. We'll make sure that we provide a link and that information for them. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey.